TIE Fighter Renegades. That's what we're running with as far as the show goes. TIE Fighter Renegades, a Star Wars podcast. I'm so excited about this because doing this show, a lot of things that outcrop out of Sovryn Tech are a lot of fun. And I think that they're wildly hot. But when I get to do this show with a man that I just love, and when I think that the content, and we heard it back when a paywall for patrons only of Sovryn Tech, we heard it from them. They said, no, this is too good. You got to get it out there in the public. And so now it is going out to the public, even though patrons might hear this one just a little bit early from when it will. So anyway, I am being joined once again by none other than Robin Freebeard. Robin, how we doing, man?
Doing awesome, man. And hell yeah. I love this.
This is so exciting.
Yeah. Believe the hype phase on, folks.
Yeah. Bravo. We're going to talk some hype phase on here in a minute because we finally got some more hype phase on in Star Wars Resistance, but we'll save that conversation for just a little bit later. I'm going to just ask you, this isn't like an important question. How's my audio? Do I sound all right? I'm working off of some new equipment here. Everything sounding good?
It's a couple points where it's getting a little garbled.
Little garbled. All right. I'm going to move up in on it and see if that helps out at all with that. But anyway, we have a great show lined up, a lot of stuff to talk about here, a lot of news. In fact, we'll open it right up with some news that, I don't think we need to cover all of it, but basically, is it this year that Galaxy's Edge, the Star Wars park within Disney, is supposed to be Disney World, Disneyland, that is supposed to be dropping? That's this year, right? When they're going to finish that up?
I don't think I've heard a hard date yet, but it certainly seems like it. And there's certainly been a lot of activity around here. People, taking aerial photos of the construction, and it's looking pretty near completion.
Yeah. So I guess in light of that, they are releasing throughout the rest of 2019. We have a ton of extraneous content. There's comic books. We've got a mini series coming out. There's a full-on novel by Delilah S. Dawson, which it's called Black Spire. Delilah S. Dawson, was she the one that wrote Rebel Rising?
That's possible. I don't recall.
Yeah, I know she's done work before, but anyway, that's fine, and that's actually available for pre-order. I already have it pre-ordered on Audible to get my hands on that. Go ahead.
She wrote Phasma.
Oh, she wrote Phasma. Okay. Well, if they give her like actually interesting content to write about, I'm sure it's going to be a fine book. So, because that Phasma book, I listened to it. You didn't listen to that one, did you, Robin?
No, I did not.
Yeah. So I listened to that. I mean, for the writing was fine. There's never really been a problem with technical writing or with the technicalities of writing with any of these books. Just some have been a little less interesting than others, and the Phasma book was a little less interesting than others, we'll put it that way. But regardless,
she did also write that short story, The Perfect Weapon, which wasn't that bad.
Oh, yeah. That was for the Journey to the Force Awakens.
Right.
With that spy that was on Tokadana.
Yeah.
I remember. Yeah, that was good. No, actually, that was very good. In fact, they even released an audio version of that. I was impressed because it was only a couple hours long, not even.
Right.
But that was excellent. So this could be very good. I think there's also a junior novel coming out as well. I think it's like a Crash of Fate or something like that. Anyway, plenty of things to come out, all in celebration, really, of Galaxy's Edge. And of course, we talked about previously on TIE Fighter Renegades. Got to get used to calling that now. On TIE Fighter Renegades, we talked about how John Williams had composed original music for the park and for the whole thing. So this is a really, really big deal, and they are certainly going to milk it for all it's worth. In general, fine. I'll check out the new Star Wars content. I'm intrigued to see what happens with this. It's not the first time that we've had a tie-in with Galaxy's Edge. The first time for that was actually the previous Thrawn novel. Thrawn, was that Alliances?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but I mean, any thoughts on this, Rob? Anything here that's like standing out, or overall thoughts on Galaxy's Edge going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. They've invested a ton of money into this project, and it's going to be crazy.
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you. I live not very far from Disneyland, and I don't know if I'm going to go to this thing when it opens, because it's just going to be too crazy.
Oh yeah, no. I want to go to it in Disney World. I'll make the trip to Florida, but I'm going to wait a year for a lot of reasons. Like I'm not going to be there the first time around because it is going to be nuts and forget it. But not surprising that they're doing this. Right. I'm happy for more Star Wars content in general, usually, and this will be, we'll see what happens.
Right.
So that's some of the more interesting news that's coming out as far as novels and comic books, which again, also I'm kind of glad because it felt like the announcements, especially earlier in the year, the announcements for a lot of novels and a lot of like comic books were pretty slim. Like, I mean, we weren't hearing much, and it seemed like, hey, we were used to getting a new thing a month through much of 2018, and that didn't happen in 2019. But now we're getting plenty of announcements of new books coming out.
Right. So, I mean, I'm sure these announcements are coming. These projects have been in the pipe for quite a while, obviously. So they were holding back.
Yeah.
For the right time to make these announcements.
Sure. I think you're right. I mean, because I was getting a little worried, but yeah, now it just seems like they were holding back. And obviously it feels like Disney in general and Lucasfilm in general have been doing quite a restructuring after, frankly, Solo and The Last Jedi and both of the issues that have arisen around those.
That's an interesting point to bring up with though, is because all of this stuff is supposed to be, hitting at the end of this year. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering if really they did learn their lesson, because I think with, things that we're going to talk about later in this show, they're risking, a little bit of overload here.
Sure. That's a good point to bring up. Yeah. Well, I guess this is something we'll keep an eye on, how this, because also, so we were watching the Star Wars show earlier. Maybe we can get into a little bit of a conversation about the Star Wars show that I wanted to have. So the Star Wars show, when I was watching that earlier, they had announced just earlier today, and this is getting recorded on February 27th, 2019. They had announced that The Mandalorian had wrapped up, with principal photography. And that's supposed to be coming out end of 2019. I mean, there's a lot of shit coming out this year. Right. And it feels kind of weird. I mean, granted, there's only one movie, as to where maybe that felt like the time frame between Last Jedi and Solo felt kind of weird. But I mean, they, on the Star Wars show, they just keep announcing, release after release and things that are finishing up and coming on. And we're actually going to talk more about some principal photography getting wrapped up a little later on. But, I want to take a second to talk about the Star Wars show. We're going to review Star Wars Resistance, but I want to touch on this. How do you feel about the Star Wars show right now? Does it feel different to you than previous years, like since it came back?
I mean, it's slowly been changing over, I feel like, the last year or so.
Sure.
And of course, they got the new host, Anthony Carboni.
Yeah.
And I mean, I first noticed it, honestly, when Battlefront 2 was coming out, and they started heavily using the Star Wars show to promote products. And there were points where they were literally doing ads for Target or whoever they are partnering with and stuff like that. And you could just tell, the people doing the show, it felt forced.
Yeah. So
pun not intended.
Right. Right. So you actually hit, and I told you, I said, at some point I want to talk about the Star Wars show on this episode. But that's all we said to each other. We didn't say what we wanted to say. But I feel vindicated because you said exactly what the Star Wars show I felt like has really turned into. And look, I think Andy Gutierrez is great. She's awesome. Anthony Carboni seems like a very funny guy. And I'm not necessarily going to insult the production team there or anything like that. But the show really does seem like it's just selling toys and games, and it's just selling the whole time instead of being about, granted, go ahead.
And I've met Auntie Gutierrez at Star Wars Celebration years ago, and she is a very genuine and sweet person. Sure. And that's why I can tell, when somebody is, somebody is authentic, and you can tell, when they're trying to sell a product they don't believe in. And that's the sense that I get with some of the stuff that they're being made to do.
Yeah, I mean, they have some interesting interviews sometimes, like when they were interviewing Elijah Wood was interesting.
Right.
I mean, there are points where they do that, but really, I feel like now all I need to do is watch the first like minute of the Star Wars show, because that's where they make all the announcements. Like that's where we first heard about the Galaxy's Edge releases and everything. Or where you hear about the Mandalorian wrapping up production or wrapping up principal photography. Otherwise, I don't like it. It's just selling a bunch of shit. And
Yeah.
I get it that they need to do that, and that Star Wars has always been a marketing machine, but it's a little much. And I don't know. I don't know what they can do about it. I don't know that they're ever going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
But it does. I like your term that it feels forced, with pun intended. Right.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, that's really all I wanted to say about the Star Wars show. Like, as to where before, I thought it was like must-see YouTube video watching for any Star Wars fan, because something interesting was getting laid out, or there was some kind of interesting interview, like they'd have John Knoll sit down, or they talk to Dennis Murin.
Right. And that's the things that I really enjoyed was when they were
Right.
interviewing like people internal to Lucasfilm. I feel like there's been less of that of late.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you used to have story group people on, like, Leland Shee and Pablo Hidalgo used to be on the show. Haven't seen them on the show in a long time.
Yeah. It's very weird. They took like a break around Christmas, and then when they came back, I mean, it was happening before then as well.
Yeah.
But now it feels a little much.
Right.
So anyway, speaking of something else that gets really piss poor YouTube content, Star Wars Resistance. Not that I was saying the Star Wars show is piss poor necessarily, but the Resistance rewind and that crap that we get for like add-on content to Star Wars Resistance, it's still horrible.
It's a waste of time. It really is. I mean, it's not even enough to be a pale shadow of what Rebels Rewind was.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what they were thinking in changing the format of that, and Auntie Gutierrez is here again. She did a great job on that show, and she's still doing the Star Wars show. Like I would
regularly.
I'd imagine she still has the time to do it. I don't know, but right. I feel like they're underutilizing her. And what they could do for Resistance, because I mean that was one of the great things about Star Wars Rebels 2 is you really got that kind of deep dive, after every episode, to kind of they would let you in on Easter eggs or give you more information about the behind the scenes production, and really not getting very, very little of that, just kind of little droplets.
Yeah. Now I do have a little bit of a theory on this, and it has to do with something we talked about that was like, wait a minute, why didn't they announce this? Why didn't they say anything about this? Which was the little short episodes that were like 2 minutes or so a pop. They were put out on was that on the Star Wars Kids channel, I think, on YouTube. That again, there was no fanfare for it whatsoever, and it would have made sense to talk about it or to announce it or even put it on the main Star Wars channel, because it was at a time when there was no new Star Wars Resistance. So why not give people something to watch, or at least let them know that it's out there? And yet it was largely missed. I didn't even catch it like initially. It wasn't until a little bit later. I do have a theory now, maybe where that came from. But before I get into that theory, why don't we do a little review of the past 4 episodes that have happened since last time we convened to do TIE Fighter Renegades here, our own little Star Wars podcast, and just want to make sure people get used to the new name. And there's been 4 episodes. The numbering on them has been a little confusing. Compared to like what it lists off as on Wikipedia and some other sources, as compared to how they're listed online or other sources online. But this is basically episode, I mean, I have it 14 to like 17, but other sources listed as 15 to 18. So we can go by name anyway. We can do that, not number. Go ahead.
Just to let people know, I mean, like I just got caught up on the last episode. Star Wars Rebels, and when Brian sent me the show notes, he sent me with the I think what is the official numbering, and so I thought I was 2 episodes behind and not just 1 at first.
Right. Yeah, very confusing numbering. I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But in any case, the episodes we're reviewing are the First Order Occupation, the New Trooper, the Core Problem, and the Disappeared. Now, I thought initially another thing that was confusing is those were the only ones listed, and we thought we were going to be doing a season 1 wrap-up this month in February 2019. But then turns out there's 21 episodes. So we still have 3 more, so we'll be talking about that come March. And we will probably be doing a season 1 wrap up then when those last 3 episodes come out. So anyway, these 4 episodes, do you have like an overall feeling about them, Rob, that you want to bring up? And then we can maybe deep dive a bit.
Unfortunately, I'm just kind of going to echo something that I said last time is it's been kind of predictable. Unfortunately, I don't think the show is really living up to its potential.
Yeah, I guess I want to say, well, all right, I agree with you. And it's not living up to its potential, nor is it, I don't know if I want to say predictable, but it also isn't going where I thought it was going to go. And I find myself disappointed, shockingly, because I think if I knew before the show started, if I knew that where we were going to go, where it's gone in the past 4 episodes throughout the month of February 2019, I would have been happy. Now that I've watched the show and gotten more into it and everything, there's another direction I actually wanted it to go, and now I don't like the direction that they've actually gone in. Which I think, to sum it up, the last 4 episodes have been all about the First Order and their very Nazi-like presence on the Colossus.
Right.
And I mean, and it's been a hardcore, like, beat you over the head. This is the Nazis, papers, please. The whole thing has been a major part of this. The First Order Occupation, I mean, it's right in the name, and you get that. The New Trooper, kind of the same idea. Kaz actually gets to run around as a stormtrooper for a little bit and finds out more of what the First Order has in mind. And basically, I mean, spoiler alerts, folks, but basically the gist is, or go ahead.
Yeah, but not really, because like I said, we've all seen The Force Awakens. We know where this is going. Right. Like I said, it's all these events are extremely predictable. Especially I really got to say, like, the Core Problem, there was really nothing that episode added to the show or to the storyline or anything. It just I don't know. I like I said, and not only that, I don't. Maybe I'd like to hear what you feel too. But are you not only disappointed with the direction of the show and the storyline, but you're getting kind of disappointed with some of the characters too?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can expand upon that if you want. I will say quickly, like the Core Problem, which had a return of Poe Dameron, which is always fun when he's there. But really, you just got reference to The Force Awakens, and you find out how he got BB-8 before going to Jakku. And, but there's nothing, like, you're not discovering anything really new. And kind of the main thrust that you discover is that the First Order wants the Colossus to be a fuel base as a staging ground to, get into the galaxy proper. But I mean, so what are you feeling about the characters there that you were bringing up?
I got to be honest with you. I feel like Disney is falling into kind of a problematic trope.
Ooh.
With female Black characters.
Oh, okay.
And I don't like what they're doing with Tam. I'm just going to say it. I think it's really disappointing. And like I said, it's problematic. I have Black female friends, and I'm sorry, folks, but they're not all, aggressive and, that trope,
Yeah. No, I know what you mean. Snapping fingers in Z formation.
Right. Yeah. It's ridiculous. And it's almost offensive.
Yeah. I mean, they're almost pulling, it feels like, from the wrestling playbook where they require, because they don't have much time for storyline, they're relying upon stereotypes.
Right. But I mean, but they've done the same thing with Sana Solo in the Star Wars comics.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And there's roads I want to go with that, but I'm not going to right now because there's other interesting parallels between Tam and Sana Solo as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'll just say, like, it's interesting that they are both either bi or lesbian characters, because it seemed like Tam was very much into the pirate gal who gets away, even though she's also that same pirate gal is a love interest, or quote unquote love interest to Kaz. But anyway, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, and I'll give the first season before I really like go deep on that. But I completely understand where you're coming from, that they're not really treating that the best. No. And that can get into a much larger conversation, some of which we've hinted at in the past on this show in previous episodes. But anyway, so they are running into that. I agree. The core problem, we get also, speaking of other female characters, we do get BB-8 gets replaced because he has to go off and do what he does in The Force Awakens. CB-23, now that's his girlfriend, right? That appears in the Poe Dameron comic?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah. I'm fairly certain it is. So, I mean, that's a fine like introduction. I thought that was an interesting little side storyline within the Poe Dameron comic, which is one of the better comics that Disney or Marvel, whatever, has done as late. So the storyline we're getting, I mean, this pretty much went whole hog inside of like the past 5 episodes. This is turned into what is the First Order doing show? And you're not getting, and this is kind of the direction, I think that's the direction that they're going. And I find myself ironically not liking it. And the reason is that we were sold a show that felt very much like Robotech. We thought there was going to be like racing and like, I mean, we've been complaining for months. Where are the aces in the Disappeared, that episode, which is a little bit different, but it's all about people having to leave. And they do mention Tokadana, which of course that's Maz's planet, right? That we see in The Force Awakens.
Right.
We do get a little more of the aces, but not much. And it looks like we're already losing Hype Phazon.
Right. Well, and they've shut the aces down. I mean, not only we're not going to have the races anymore, apparently, if the First Order has anything to say about it.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I wanted, after they're trying so hard and everybody's like, oh, this is going to be kind of like a dumb racing show. What does this have to do with The Force Awakens? What does it have to do with anything? What does it have to do with the Resistance? I found myself, as the show went on, I was wanting these other characters. Maybe it's because the main characters just aren't that interesting, or they're too tropey. I don't know if that's why I'm so hungry for the aces, but they were selling us the aces as major characters, and we're getting pretty much nothing. I mean, we finally got a line out of Griff Halloran. One line.
That's great.
Yeah, right. That's what he said.
Great.
That's just exactly. Great. That's all he said.
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, and you're doing full interviews like with the guy that's playing Hype Phazon, whose name is Phazon. And yet this is all we get of him, and now it seems like he's just kind of gone. Right. I mean, maybe they're going to come in the last episode of the season and save the day. I don't know, but we're not getting anything that the show was billed as. And there's a part of me that, let me first ask you, do you agree with that assessment? Do you feel the same way? Yeah.
No, absolutely. In fact, I mean, you think about it, we've had 17 episodes now so far, and I can think of 3 episodes where we've seen races. You had the pilot, you had the platform classic, and then you had the beginning of this episode. And at the beginning of The Disappeared, I was excited to see the races. And then they immediately shut us down. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And so here's the thing. Okay, so we're in agreement on this. Now, I actually wonder, those YouTube shorts that I mentioned earlier, however many of those there's, I don't know, 8 or 10, however many there were. I wonder if they like completely redirected this show. Because there is a point where suddenly what felt to me like native advertising on, IO9, go down the list of like these kind of pop culture websites, started to say, oh, actually Star Wars Resistance is for everybody. And I wonder if Resistance fell prey to the reorg going on out of, that came out of the fallout with Last Jedi and Solo. And I guess I'm wondering if those YouTube shorts that were put out there were animation, perhaps even from alternate episodes that were made, because it feels like it took a right turn so fast, like way too fast. I felt like it or not a right turn, but just a turn away from what was originally being sold off. I mean, that's just a thought on my part, but I feel like this is not what was originally in mind, because you could have so easily hyped this show. No pun intended there. You could have so easily hyped this show from the beginning with these kinds of episodes that we've been getting in the past month. And I think a lot more people would have been watching, but they didn't do that at all. They played it up as this is a racing show. You know, I mean, yeah, there's some stuff with the First Order, but really you're here to have all this fun with these, aces and everything. So I don't know. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm open to being completely wrong, but it's just a feeling that I've got.
Well, I mean, I'll say right at the bat. I mean, what we've seen of the show far, we've seen a good chunk of the season. I think there's only 3 or 4 episodes left.
Yeah, I think 3.
This doesn't feel like the pacing of a Dave Filoni show.
That's true. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
for
I
sure.
mean, and we already knew that that he was kind of letting other people take over for this, but his name is still prominently displayed as, like the creator or executive producer or whatever. I mean, if you look at the credits, it makes it sounds like Dave Filoni's running the show on this. But to me, just from what we've seen, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah. I mean, it almost feels a little directionless, which is, and that falls in with the pacing as well. I agree with you. So, I mean, it's not like what's going on is necessarily bad. I just feel like it's not what we were originally sold about this show at all. I mean, there are parts of it that I think are shitty, or parts of it that are bad or too tropey or whatever, kind of like we discussed. But yeah, I didn't see it, really getting this serious this quickly. And I wonder about it. I mean, we do know we're going to get a season 2 though, so we'll see where this can all end up. Right. I mean, any other, were there anything that really stood out in these past 4 episodes? Cause they really all feel like they were kind of just like continuing off of each other very quickly.
Well, I mean, considering the way the episode ended and looking at the titles of the coming episodes, I think we're being set up for a huge format change for next season.
Okay.
I don't think we're going to be on the platform anymore.
Well, then we'll never get the aces.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah. But that's pretty much my prediction is that we're not going to be on the platform in season 2.
That's so crazy. You know what else is weird? Like there has been, talk about extraneous materials. There's been no comic books. There's been no junior novels, nothing extra for this show. That's another part where I feel like they maybe didn't know exactly where they wanted to go.
I think that may play into your theory, because they have to have that stuff ready far in advance.
Yeah.
And, I think the other thing too is like, a lot of the early criticism was that this is a kid's show,
right?
And I think it finally, the people at Lucasfilm just kind of gave into that and decided to make it a kid's show.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, I definitely agree with you in that at some point, the heads, whoever they are,
powers that be.
The powers that be at Disney, and I do think this seems more like a Disney decision decided in a huge change for what this show was going to be. Yeah.
I mean, also, admittedly, like how much stuff do they want to put out there that's not going to be on Disney Plus? Especially that's Star Wars related.
Yeah,
because Star Wars and Marvel are going to sell that network. And so. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this will wrap up fast. I could believe that.
I was just thinking the same thing. Is I wonder how many seasons this is going to last.
Yeah, it might just go 2. I mean, and at the pace that it's going, that's fine with me. I don't even want to give it the chance that Rebels had to like really, grow. Like people got to grow up with that show over the years. This doesn't even need that opportunity. So, I mean, it's not bad, but there was a way I was thinking and that I thought we were sold that it was going to go. And I was getting bought into going in that direction, and it's not. Yeah, I'm a little disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. That I think that really just sums it up. Is we're all disappointed. And
Yeah.
I don't think we're really alone in that.
Yeah, no, I don't. I
And
don't
then
either.
there's really not much talk even on the internet about it, which means people aren't watching it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. Actually, no, that's something I need to do. I might need to check the old Twitterverse and just see what's kind of being said there. But I don't imagine there's much.
Yeah, I follow a lot of Star Wars accounts on Twitter, and I haven't seen anything about it.
Right.
And I don't even know if that there's a Resistance subreddit either, because I know there was a huge Star Wars Rebels subreddit.
Sure, there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, I was on there quite often until I got banned.
That's a story we're gonna have to hear about sometime.
Yeah, you'll like why I got banned too. It's right up your alley.
All right. We're gonna. I'm putting that down. One of these times we're gonna tell that story, okay? Because I gotta know how the hell that happened. Because Rob is the nicest guy I've ever met in my life, and for him to get banned, shit must have gotten real. So, all right. Well, that's a story we're gonna tell at some point here. So anyway, no worries. So in the real world, we have things called phones, and they no. Anyway, okay, so, well, I think that ring is actually a great opportunity to change gears here away from Star Wars Resistance. I think we've said all that needs to be said right now. Our season 1 I guess retrospective would be the most, well, that'll be the most telling of where the hell the show actually ended up. Anything else you want to add in there, Robin, or we can move on?
I got my predictions out there and what I think of the show. Definitely we could talk more about some of the characters in the future and in our wrap up. But yeah, it's unfortunately it is not, looking great at this point.
Agreed. So, all right, well, let's look into something that, well, we don't exactly know how it's looking at all, which is kind of strange, in my opinion, but supposedly we might get a trailer in April. There are people saying this, or maybe even sooner. But why don't we talk a little episode 9, and which has just in the last week with episode 9, they ended up, well, they just like with The Mandalorian, they wrapped up principal photography, and so now it's all full on post production, and then things are going forward with that. Sci-Fi Wire, or Sci-Fi Wire as I like to call it, did a little bit of a write-up on this, and the headline for it is Abrams' response to making episode 9 after divisive Last Jedi. Quote, every movie is its own movie, end quote. Right out of the gate, that sounds ridiculous, but because this is a Star Wars saga, it's not like singular movies, but okay. So anyway, I'm going to read a little bit of the story, and then we can kind of comment on it and build up from there, because there's a whole J.J. Abrams conversation I think that needs to be had here. So I'll read a little bit. J.J. Abrams has just finished shooting Star Wars Episode 9, one of the most anticipated films of the year, and that means he's finally talking about the experience of making the film, at least a little bit. Abrams stepped out with his wife, Katie McGrath, to attend the 14th annual Oscar Wilde Awards hosted by his production company, Bad Robot. And Entertainment Tonight was able to get a few words from him about Episode 9. Abrams was his usual mystery box wielding self when it came to details, refusing to give any hints as to the film's still unannounced title and dodging anything concrete about what's in the film. But he did describe wrapping the movie as, quote, pretty emotional, end quote, and emphasized over and over again that he can't wait to finally show it to fans. Let me see if I can get to some of the quotes here. Scroll down a bit, and here we go. When asked how he processed that, he talks a little bit about The Last Jedi in response, I guess, somewhat to the attacks that happened and just the overall fan response to The Last Jedi. But basically, he says with episode 9, quote, I think every movie is its own movie. Obviously, this is a trilogy. We brought to that movie all the passion, referring to episode 9, we brought to that movie all the passion and hard work we would have no matter what. I think the story speaks for itself. I really, truly can't wait for you to see it, end quote. And Abrams did also take a moment to gush a little bit about working with Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian on the film, something fans have been waiting for ever since the movie that would become The Force Awakens was announced. Quote, I met him once before, and he was such a sweet guy. I got to tell you, I have such unbelievable respect for him. We had a great time, and he was wonderful. He just had this aura around him. He's really just an incredible man and an incredible actor. And, of course, Episode 9 will be out December 20th, 2019. So, I mean, there's some things within here that could get talked about a little bit more. But, I mean, what do you feel about that quick comment from J.J. Abrams? At least the first one, and then we could talk about the Lando comment.
I think it was he knew he was talking to the press.
Yeah, right.
That's what I think. It's interesting that, he says these kind of things like every movie, its own movie. We know for a fact, because we learned this before Episode 8 came out, that Rian Johnson wanted J.J. Abrams to add some stuff to the Force Awakens to connect what he had planned, and Abrams shot him down and said no.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know what degree, but we know at least to some degree that, J.J. Abrams wasn't completely on board with what Rian Johnson had planned.
Yeah, I mean, and there are very clear changes made between the two movies. Particularly Snoke, I think, was definitely a very different character. You could see it in his eyes, and that's not figurative. That's literal. He has eyes in The Last Jedi, where in The Force Awakens he did not. The movement of the scar on Kylo Ren. I mean, there's lots of little things where Rian Johnson's like, look, I need to make these little changes for whatever fucking reason he felt he needed to make them. I don't know. I mean, those are just little ones. There's certainly much larger ones that people are highly debating. I mean, myself, I don't trust a damn thing that J.J. Abrams ever said. You and I both, Rob. I mean, we survived, the press, what would you call it? I don't know, the conversations with the press around Star Trek Into Darkness,
right?
Where, Benedict Cumberbatch, oh no, he's not Khan. He's this guy named John Harrison and blah, blah, blah. And then what happens when we actually see the movie? Of course he's Khan, which we all knew.
Yeah, we all knew Abrams is a charlatan when he's talking to the public.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I guess getting, this gives somebody some clicks, and we're talking about it even on the Star Wars show, even though I think it's part of a grander conversation to get into, or on our Star Wars show, I should say. But yeah, I don't really trust much of what he says. However, I certainly do believe him that working with Billy D. Williams is probably a shit ton of fun, and you can't help but fall into the charisma of that man.
Right. I think that part was genuine. But sure. Like I said, in addressing the controversy, I think he's smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. I think he's trying to say, well, just make sure you give my movie a shot, before you judge it on the merits of something else. Right. That's probably what he's trying to say. But that gets into a bit of a bigger conversation. Do you have any other comments on that part, or we can move into?
Yeah, no, I mean, he makes some personal comments about Rian Johnson too in that article, which here I don't have anything to add to that other than like you said, I think he's very aware of that he's talking to the press and the public, and he's not necessarily being authentic.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like I said, I have no reason to ever believe a word that comes out of his mouth. So, he's just, we've learned from this guy, and there's a million other things that we could talk about with that. But so I agree with your assessment there. So now this is something we actually wanted to cover last month. This is a story from Forbes from January of 2019. And here's the headline for it. Paramount has canceled Star Trek 4, and I did say Star Trek 4, and Disney's Star Wars is to blame. Now, this is something that I've talked about on the Star Trek show that I do on the network, which is a Star Trek update. And when Star Trek 4 was getting canned, even though it seemed very well along, they had, what was her name? S.J. Clarkson was going to be directing it and everything. And this was, really, it seemed to be going apace. There were some arguments about pay between Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine, but otherwise things seemed to be going forward. But then suddenly it just seemed like, oh yeah, no, we're canceling Star Trek 4. Now, of course, Star Trek 4 is not The Voyage Home. This is a movie within the Kelvin timeline, which was started by J.J. Abrams and his little company, Bad Robot. which we just referenced earlier. So now the basic gist of this article, it's an interesting read. It's some degree of speculation, but the basic gist is that now that there's actually, when the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie came out in 2009, I mean, what did you think of it, Robin? Did you love it?
Into Darkness?
No, the first one.
Oh, the first one. Yeah, no, I loved the first one. I really enjoyed it a lot. I mean, and it's one of those rare movies where they really grab you in the beginning and just don't let go. And you did a terrific job with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I agree. I thought the 2009 Star Trek movie was fantastic. I mean, I was blown away at how good it was. Now, the argument goes, and people have said this long before this Forbes article, that the new Star Trek movies that take place in the Kelvin timeline that were started by J.J. Abrams felt like a Star Wars version of Star Trek. And that's basically what this Forbes article is saying, is that the reason that Star Trek 4 was canned is because the Kelvin timeline Star Trek movies aren't necessary anymore, because it's a pale shadow of what they were trying to be anyway, which was Star Wars movies. Now that we actually have Star Wars movies, we don't. Their argument is we don't need Star Trek movies. How do you feel about that argument?
I mean, I don't think it's an unfair comparison to make. Mm-hmm. And even when J.J. Abrams was making the first Star Trek movie, I think there were interviews where he said that he admitted that he wasn't necessarily even a big Star Trek fan, and that Star Wars was more his thing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think that's an unfair comparison, but as to it being the reason why we're not getting more Star Trek movies, I smell some bullshit.
Aha. Okay. I mean, Star Trek Beyond did not perform well, even though I actually gave it movie of the year back in 2016. I thought it was awesome. I really, really liked that movie. Especially, I mean, I liked Into Darkness too, but especially in comparison to Into Darkness, I thought it was a real return to form for Star Trek in general. In fact, it felt like Star Trek and not so much Star Wars-ized Star Trek, like this Forbes article is saying. I mean, that did underperform, so there was sketchiness around even doing a fourth Star Trek movie. It was very much in the air if we were ever going to get one. But I mean, do you have an alternative theory? It's okay if you don't. I mean, do you have an alternative theory as to why?
I mean, the Star Trek 4 was before this news even came out. I mean, we knew it was in trouble. They had lost their lead actors. And there were also people in the industry making comments about how, the actors who play these iconic characters don't matter. We can just replace them with any actor. And I thought personally that was really stupid thing to say and kind of offensive, because I mean, it does matter. I mean, I think to a certain degree, yes, you can replace actors. And of course, Hollywood and television have done this many times before. And, they've gone on to make great stuff. But don't tell me it doesn't matter at all. Don't tell me that we're so stupid that we're not going to notice.
Yeah, I mean, and look, like Carl Urban made Dr. McCoy his own thing. I mean, I can't exactly buy, what they're saying. Go ahead.
And really what the feeling I got is that this is a convenient excuse for Paramount to use to cover up for the fact that they don't know how to negotiate with actors.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense, as far as that goes. Now, so, yeah, I mean, my theory on what happened with Star Trek 4, I mean, I could just as easily believe it just took too long. Like things were just taking way too long and people wanted to get to work. And it's not like as far as I know, they didn't hand S.J. Clarkson a paycheck and, to like have her in a holding pattern until they're ready to start production.
Right.
And so, she's going to go get paid and she's going to do something guaranteed, like directing Game of Thrones or the Game of Thrones prequel, which is what she ended up leaving to go do, which was part of the death knell for people of Star Trek 4. Then you also have that overshadow of the Quentin Tarantino movie, which how the hell are you going to compete with that possibility? Everybody and their mother wants to see that film.
But it sounded like it's doubtful that's going to even happen now too.
Agreed. But I mean, you had like these two projects that I think was confusing the fuck out of people. Also, you have what CBS is doing, and there have been behind the scenes, there have been a lot of legal battles between Viacom or, between Paramount and CBS right now, where like Sumner Redstone's daughter is trying to get Paramount back into CBS.
Right.
Because
and that's been going on for literally decades.
Yeah.
I mean, this stuff goes back to the days of UPN.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, it's been going ever since that split, which was controversial at the time.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a long running battle, and I think really much of it, if anything, really has to do with that. It is not because, well, we don't need Star Trek movies because now we have Star Wars movies.
Right, but I mean, that was mainly a CBS thing. I mean,
sure.
People have to understand, like, the Star Trek productions are really in two different houses. You have Paramount with the movies and you have CBS with television. And,
right.
They play and they get along with each other to a certain degree, but to a certain degree, they also don't cooperate as well.
Yeah. Now this gets, and you're right, and this gets into a very interesting thing that I talked about recently on a Sovereign Tech patron-only Q&A, on a Wednesday Q&A, where there is a channel, and look, I'm not saying I agree with these people 100% on everything that they say. I do question some of I think they might sit on a political side of things or a cultural side of things that I don't really agree with. But there's a YouTube channel fairly popular called Midnight's Edge. And they have been espousing for a while now, particularly with Star Trek, and this has relevance to Star Wars. There's a reason we're talking about this on TIE Fighter Renegades here. And that is, so they were talking about how basically for Paramount to be able to make a Star Trek movie, they had to agree upon, they had a very specific IP license, intellectual property license of what they could do with Star Trek. Basically, CBS apparently told them, whatever you make has to be 25% different from anything else Star Trek ever done. And that's the only way you're allowed to do it. That way, there's no confusion between CBS's Star Trek, or supposedly less confusion between CBS's Star Trek and Paramount's Star Trek. Okay. And there's like a third party in here, which is potentially Bad Robot, which is J.J. Abrams, his company. He started, it's him. Okay. And it sounds like the gist that comes from these kind of, it's almost conspiracy theories within Star Trek itself. The basic gist that comes up is that J.J. Abrams wants he wants a cut of everything that the marketing material, the marketing, the merchandising, I should say, not the marketing necessarily, the merchandising that comes out, all these different things that come out. He wants a cut of all of that. And he cuts a deal whenever he gets involved in something to make it his own enough so that he, it's very clear what he should be making money off of from the franchise and what he shouldn't. Now, what I brought up on the Wednesday Q&A was that I think this is the reason why in The Force Awakens, we had no familiar aliens whatsoever. Everything was different. It wasn't even the Rebellion anymore. It was the Resistance. It wasn't the Galactic Empire anymore. It was the First Order. He wanted to rename everything. That way he was guaranteed into the future, whenever the First Order is mentioned, or whenever, a toy gets made of the Resistance and not the Rebellion from the original trilogy, whatever, he gets a guaranteed cut of that because that's Bad Robot's creation and that belongs to them. And I think this personally, this theory, and maybe if I think of it, I'll link to some of Midnight's Edge's videos about this. They didn't really take it as far as the Star Wars, but I think it's there. And I think this goes so far as to why even something as simple as why C-3PO has a red fucking arm in The Force Awakens. It's because he's going to have to get a cut of the sale of every time somebody wants to put out a toy of C-3PO with a red arm on. And I mean, and it gets very ugly. There's this real IP game that's just that shell game almost that's going on. And it just shows how crappy intellectual property is. I mean, and the mess that it fucking makes. Because as far as with Star Trek goes, this runs into where, like, why Star Trek Discovery feels so weird for so many people, even though you and I, Rob, we both, especially season 2, we've been enjoying it. But that this is why Star Trek Discovery doesn't look like the original series so much, because it has to be such and so much different, because now everybody's kind of stuck in this Bad Robot version of Star Trek. Like that's how the deal effectively got made. And I think similar might be happening with Star Wars. And in fact, this might be why, and I want to get your take on all of this, Robin, but this might even be why they went with different directors for each movie, because otherwise they would have had to have like coughed up so much to J.J. Abrams that Disney might not have even made, might not even have broken even on what they were producing with the new trilogy. But, also I think that with episode 9, they're like, oh, we got to bring in a trusted name because, Last Jedi was such a fuck up, or in so many people's minds, it was a fuck up. So anyway, there's very ugly IP stuff going on. And again, my final conclusion with all of this is that because of IP law, because of these deals getting made where things have to be such and so much different from previous incarnations, this is why we're getting so many remakes. This is why we're getting, all these reboots and everything else. And that basically we can't even get great art anymore because everybody's scared to death of falling outside of this like 25% same number or falling within that. Anyway, give me what you got, Robin. I know you're dying to say something about all this.
So yeah, I can easily imagine that all of this is true. In fact, I think it probably is.
Sure.
But I also think it is a symptom of a much, much bigger problem. And this is going through all of entertainment right now. And it's something that you did kind of hint at in the episode where you talked about this previously.
Yeah.
And you brought up that there were certain people that, came after Gene Roddenberry for characters like Wesley Crusher. And he says, no, you don't understand. I make this for me.
Right.
And I think this is a huge problem in entertainment right now is that there are not the kind of personalities who are willing to step up and take ownership of these, franchises, these IPs, these ideas. Instead, they're like J.J. Abrams, and they don't want ownership of it. They just want a slice of the pie. They want their slice of the pie. They want the money.
Yeah.
And so, and I see this everywhere. I see it with Marvel. I see it with Star Wars. I see it with Star Trek. I mean, you name the franchise. There is no, personality with the force of will to come through and say, I'm making this for the passion of it, and I'm doing it for me. Right. I'm not doing it to please anybody. I'm not doing it for profits. I'm not doing it for a cut of the pie. I'm not doing it to put my stamp on it. I'm doing it because I believe passionately in the story that I want to tell. And that is absent.
Yeah.
In all of this.
Yeah. Maybe the one who maybe Gareth Edwards might've been like the one guy that actually gave a shit. But even he got, like they sort of booted him, right? With Rogue One, and they brought in that guy who came right out and said, it's like, oh, I don't care about Star Wars.
Right.
Fuck Star Wars.
Right. And another exception might be Dave Filoni, but like we were talking before, he seems to be somewhat missing in action right now.
Yeah. And who knows what's going on with it. I mean, is he busy with The Mandalorian or what? We don't know. But yeah, no, I agree with you. There is so much. It does feel like there's just a lot of money grubbing going on, and not like an actual passion and love for the franchise, itself. It's, what can we inject of ourselves into this so that I get this, what do they call that? Mailbox money, where I get this,
residuals.
Yeah. Right. You get residuals, you get that passive income, right? You never have to make the movie again. You never have to work in Star Wars again, but you're going to make money off of it for the rest of your life.
Because everybody knows the story about how George Lucas made all of his money with the merchandising deal that he got and that 20th Century Fox never considered. And it's literally a legend within Hollywood. And like everybody, that's the holy grail for people in entertainment now. They want that. And the thing is you talk to George Lucas about this stuff, that was an afterthought to him too.
Right.
It was just the thing that made all the stuff in the future that he did possible. But if you asked him if that's what he really cared about, no, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it was pure luck that he held on to the rights to Star Wars. It was, like you said, it was an afterthought, because
he was just trying to sell T-shirts.
Right.
Literally, that's the quote. I was just trying to sell T-shirts.
Yeah.
To promote the movie.
Exactly, because most people, like, I mean, Gene Roddenberry lost control of Star Trek. You know, it was owned by CBS / Paramount / whatever, or, you know, Viacom, what that ended up becoming. George Lucas just held on to the rights to Star Wars. Sure, he had 20th Century Fox distribute it, but that's all they were doing. I mean, the prequels are the most expensive independent films ever made, and they probably always will be. You know, even though they did go through 20th Century Fox and makes it look good. Yeah, and so I think, I mean, granted, like, I applaud George Lucas for pulling that off, you know, and setting the standard. But I think that's exactly what J.J. Abrams is doing. He's like, no, I want to be able, there's got to be a way where I can hold on to the rights of what I did, even though it's a franchise I don't own. Somehow I've got to hold on to those rights and get the merchandising residuals and all this other stuff out of it. And I think Bad Robot comes in and strong arms that position, you know, and takes that. And it's right now it's fucking Star Trek. And that might be a big reason why we don't have Star Trek 4. And, you know, I could very well see where it could be fucking with Star Wars in a very real way that we don't even know.
Right.
But anyway, go ahead.
Well, yeah, he's concerning himself more with the covetousness of this rather than with the passion that he should be investing in what he's working on.
Right. I mean, because that was one of the, I mean, you know, I like The Force Awakens. But easily one of my biggest complaints was, I mean, thank fuck that the Millennium Falcon was in there, but like, where's my Star Wars? Where's the Star Wars that I know? None of it was really there.
And there was that change to provide him with that, you know, maybe not quite 25%, but they changed the radar dish.
Yeah. You know? No, well, yeah, that's another part of it. Like all these, so that way, when you put out that version of the Millennium Falcon, who gets that money?
Right.
JJ's getting a part of it. Yep. And it's doing things. I mean, it just seems so disrespectful for the art. And look, like I said on that Wednesday Q&A, I know that this industry has been this way, and most industries work this way and have been doing so for a long, long time. But now it's becoming really apparent, and you can't miss it anymore. Yeah. And part of it is because people have been like growing up with this shit for so long, and that when it suddenly changes, now we really notice.
Now it's interfering with the art itself.
Exactly.
Whereas before that stuff was behind the scenes and you heard the rumors and you heard the gossip and you heard about the hurt feelings and the dirty deals and all that stuff. But there was a certain point where it didn't, interfere and impinge upon the art itself.
Yeah.
And now that's not the case anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I was thinking about it, especially as more like a little more as it relates to Star Trek, just because there's more Star Trek to look at. It's not necessarily because it doesn't affect it in the same way it does, or, as compared to Star Wars. But like a part of me is thinking, I think my prediction is, because again, I think this is affecting art across the board. It's affecting every franchise. And maybe this is why a lot of attempts to not reimagine, but actually restart Battlestar Galactica, for example, never happened because nobody wanted to pay out for the rest of the rights, to it and everything. And so they just reimagined it, and they got to cut a deal where, okay, well, as long as you're 25% different, you can do whatever the fuck you want, and we'll give it to you on the cheap, which is the CBS Paramount deal, like with Star Trek. But in 100 years, and I love The Next Generation. I love all of Star Trek. I mean, I really do. But I think we might look at the original series in 100 years as like being the greatest. Like, I know it's not held that way right now, but I think it's going to stand because it was a trendsetter, and this kind of bullshit wasn't going on back then in the 60s, or at least perhaps not as prevalent anyway. I think we might look at that as like, wow, that was really unique. That was really forward thinking because it was the trendsetter. There was no trend at the time.
Right.
And,
well, I mean,
go ahead.
We really did see, I feel, and I'm sure you've talked about this before. I really feel the end of that era was back in the 90s when we grew up and we got The Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager, because after that, it just hasn't been the same.
Yeah.
And it's been the case with all these franchises. I mean, you look at the Star Wars Expanded Universe too, which we're going to talk about later. But, that was definitely still uniquely Star Wars in its own thing. And it was done for the passion of Star Wars, as shitty as some of those books really were.
Oh, yeah. And there were some fucking stinkers, man. Absolutely. But yeah, no, you're right. Even look at the comic books. Like, there hasn't been an ounce of the passion that Dark Horse had except for maybe like the Lando series.
Yeah.
In what Marvel has done since they took over. Not even close to the passion that you had with Dark Empire, Tales of the Jedi. I mean, go down a list of these comic books. And yeah, we might talk about some of this a little later on. The problem is this is very depressing for me, because it's like it seems almost legally, and I use that word specifically, it is legally impossible for me to have art again that I can fall in love with again, because everything has to follow. Like, it's just like how all automobiles look almost exactly the same today, except for Lamborghinis. But that's because half the price of what you pay for a Lamborghini is paying off the regulators to let them have a funny looking headlight. Okay. And so, everything is being legislated to literally be the same because of copyright law. And it's so nuts. And it's just like, when people say today to you, oh, all the great movies have already been made, all the great TV shows have already been made. Yeah, I think that's true. I think that might be an actual objective statement, because it cannot be made that way again. It's not possible.
Yeah. No, they were definitely a product of time. I mean, there's no way in hell that anybody could make Star Wars again. Right. And I mean, A New Hope. There's just, it's impossible.
Sure.
And it was uniquely a product of its time period in the 70s too. I mean, it was, and this here again, getting back to, I really feel like, that sort of style of making art was really thriving back then, because you had, the whole Hollywood system was pretty much broken and dead back in the late 60s, early 70s. And you had all these, directors coming out, the Spielbergs and that entire crowd of people that came out of that era. And it was really, like I said, when you had these personalities, forces of will coming into the industry and pouring all their passion into it and creating great art.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we climax, baby.
Yeah, right. We've peaked.
Yeah.
we had peak Hollywood 20 years ago. Yeah.
And I mean, and I've seen this coming for a long time, and we've both seen signs of this, but and it's something that you and I actually kind of hinted at in the very early episodes that you and I started doing together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things I stated early on is Disney could do whatever they want to Star Wars, but they're not going to ruin it, because I do still have all of that stuff from back in the 80s and 90s that I can still enjoy today. And I don't care what anybody says, but none of the stuff that Disney does diminishes that art in any way whatsoever. And if you think so, I'm sorry, but you're wrong. And you need to pull your head out of your ass.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. Well said. And in fact, this is something I've been wrestling a bit, having conversations with other people, like Brian, why do you love Star Wars so much? Why are you so nuts about this? Blah, blah, blah. And, that got asked to me like a couple of years ago, back when The Force Awakens was coming out. And I was thinking about it, yeah, wait a minute. Why do I really like this? And I came to the conclusion that while the original trilogy was great, it was the expanded universe. It was the video games. It was, everything, the passion projects that were, some of them officially licensed, that were coming out in the late 80s and throughout the 90s. That's what made me love Star Wars. Yeah. And, like TIE Fighter, and which is why we named the show TIE Fighter Renegades, because we fucking love that game so much. That was totally an inspiration for that.
Well, it's just the sandbox nature of the universe.
Right.
And that's something that we've had since kids, playing with those early Kenner toys and stuff. It literally was, a universe of infinite imagination, and you could do anything, and you still can.
Yeah.
I still play the old West End Games RPG and come up with my own storylines, and I don't have to reference anything in the Disney universe if I don't want to. Sometimes I bring in stuff from shows like Rebels that I really like, but I can tailor it to fit my needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I'll tell you, the more I think about it, the more I think it was absolutely brilliant. In 85, this was just after the original trilogy was finished. You had your animated series like Ewoks and Droids, which, by the way, anybody that fucking complains about Star Wars having kid shows today, that's old hat. That's been done before. Okay. So to say that there were some glory days where there weren't kid shows for Star Wars, you're full of shit. But anyway, regardless of that, Kenner had a brilliant idea back in 85 to try and continue the marketing or the merchandising machine that was Star Wars. And it was called Star Wars. I think it was the Epic Continues.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you guys haven't heard about this before, there's a YouTube channel. Do you remember the name of it?
Yeah, it's Toy Galaxy.
Toys Galaxy, yes. They did a great episode on this that you need to check out because it really was brilliant.
Yeah, and so, I wanted to bring this up because, so what they did was basically they were going to sell toy sets that gave you that sandbox. Like, okay, this is the continuing storyline. George Lucas is not making any more movies. So we have what's happening in the Star Wars universe. And it would feel official because it's coming from the toy line, which is what was keeping Star Wars in the popular mindset in 1985 anyway, without movies being out there. And they said, okay, the Clone Wars have restarted. General Tarkin, amazingly, is still alive, which personally I think is a great fucking idea. And we're going to sell you these toys and you get to create your own stories. And like every few months or something, we'll send out like a little newsletter. It was almost like, what do they call that in the role playing or the tabletop genre, FPGA or whatever, where like they'll create where they'll create campaigns and like they send it out to you for role players to do or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, whatever that is. I think that's golf, but it doesn't matter. So bottom line is they would give you updates of what's going on in the story, but they'd leave it vague enough to where what you played with as a kid, or not so much of a kid at heart, perhaps, would be as much the Star Wars universe as anything else.
Right.
And it was a beautiful, brilliant idea because it put that sandbox in the hands of the fans. Okay. And that's great. The other thing that's great about it is was that all about selling more toys? Was that all about making a merchandising dollar, just like everything we were talking about J.J. Abrams is doing is? Yes, but at least Kenner was fucking honest about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? At least there was no middleman.
And let's not forget that business model brought us all the great cartoons that we got in the 80s.
Yes.
Because all the great cartoons in the 80s were basically existed to sell the toys.
They were 30-minute commercials. Yes.
So don't tell me that you can't, make great art with that business model. You can't.
Yeah, exactly. So, but, there wasn't some idiot trying to like rewrite everything that you knew in Star Wars. They just wanted to continue the story. And it would have been the way to go. It really would have. I mean, I'm glad for what we ended up with the work that Timothy Zahn did and so on. But boy, I would love to have a Star Wars universe where the Epic Continues was a fucking thing. Yeah. I think that could have been an amazing world.
Hey, a lot of this really just comes down to an old saying: if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah. That, and they don't make it like they used to.
That's true.
I think both of those hold up perfectly well with this. It's so crazy. So yeah, I mean, there's some of this is speculation, even on Midnight's Edge part, who we kind of started this conversation with. But J.J. Abrams' actions are very, very specious, which also started this whole conversation off because he knew he was talking to the press, and you can never trust what that guy says to the press, and so on. Yeah, I mean, I'll make that clear, but it makes so much sense. And finally, you can say to yourself, wait, why won't they just do this completely obvious fucking thing that even the most a simpleton of a fan could come up with? But they won't do it. It's because they legally can't. And I really think that's going on. And I think the entertainment industry is hurting hard.
And it's not even that it is that they legally can't, but we have people like J.J. Abrams who are just out for their slice of the pie. Here again, They don't want to take creative ownership of it. They just want their chunk of it to get their residuals.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's the mindset of these people and sort of their sort of economic ethics, if you will.
Yeah. And I'll give you a saying of mine from Sovereign Tech. This is a classic. Of course, the first part was actually said by Ayn Rand, which is profit's not a dirty word. I agree with you. But here's the Sovereign Tech part. Value's not a dirty word either. And I don't think we're getting value as fans with what's getting put out there.
Absolutely.
So Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I wanted to get your take on that, Rob, and see what you thought about it all. Because I think this is something that the ramifications of this are going to get felt more and more and more in a lot of franchises, not just Star Wars or Star Trek. But anyway, that said, or if you have anything else, Rob, you want to get in, or we can go on to our fan production of the month.
I think it's time to get on to our fan production of the month.
Hell yeah. So the fan production of the month is where we find something done by Star Wars fans that actually still have some fucking passion. We find that, and we like to give it a little highlight here. And this month's fan production of the month is one that last month's was phenomenal. We talked about Vader Episode 1. Was that Shards of the Past? Was that what that was called? Something like that? Yeah. This is one that you can also find on YouTube, but it's really just an audio play. Now, as somebody that produces audio theater myself, which I do, I know a thing or two about how to make this work. And this is called The Star Wars. You can watch it you can listen to it on YouTube. It's also available in other ways, but it's totally a fan production. There's nothing official here. As far as I can tell, the people that made it, I think it's a guy named Chris Bates or something like that, isn't making a dime off of it, which is probably how he's getting away with it. But basically what they did is they got a few, people, quote unquote, voice actors to come together, and they took the original Star Wars script, similar to the one that was used for Dark Horse's comic book release of the Star Wars, which has, General Star Killer, and, it's slightly different. Or I guess in a lot of ways, very different from A New Hope and what we would get in Star Wars in general. And they put that to voice. Like, they read the script off and they put in some music and a little effects here and there and everything. And I think if you've never experienced the original Star Wars script or one of the original versions of the script that are out there, this is a great way to do it because you can listen to it pretty quickly. I'm not going to say that the voice acting is the greatest thing I've ever heard in my life, but that's okay. I have some understanding about how all that works. That's all right. It gets the point across, and it's kind of fun, and it's just an intriguing thing to listen to. We were talking about Star Wars: The Epic Continues. This is another alternate version of Star Wars, not a fan interpretation. It is based off of some original George Lucas scripts. And in fact, when you read the comments, it's funny. When you read the YouTube comments, which are usually a cesspool, admittedly, but a lot of people come out and say, wow, I guess this is just more proof that Star Wars was saved in the editing room, not by George Lucas, but by his wife. And when you listen to it, it's interesting to hear, but you go, well, And I know you and I, Rob, we've talked about that quite a bit. That Star Wars probably A New Hope anyway was saved in the editing room.
Yeah. Marshall Lucas was a godsend to those productions.
Absolutely.
All three of those movies, because people didn't know, I think were they divorced by the time we Return of the Jedi?
Yes.
I think they were either divorced or they were in proceedings to get divorced, but she still edited that movie. She still had her hands in it. So, that's one thing that the originally trilogy does have over the prequels is it had, her touch on it.
Yeah. It had a master editor. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And you also had Gary Kurtz. You had some people there who I think could have helped steer the ship in a very good direction.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a historical oddity, if anything, to listen to, but it's a nice, quick way to consume it. So I just wanted to share it, and I applaud anybody. I think audio theater is wonderful. I love doing it. I applaud anyone that engages in it. So I definitely think it's worth checking out. And go ahead.
If people want some imagery to go on to, there was also a comic book that Dark Horse did, which was an adaptation of the same script.
Yes.
So you can check that too along with it.
Yeah, and that was well done as well. I actually really I enjoyed that quite a bit, just because the artistry was really at another level.
Yeah, it was superb.
Yeah, especially.
Dark Horse doesn't hire tracers.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like certainly far better than what Marvel has been doing through much of their comic runs with Star Wars. Yeah. Dark Horse actually hires artists, people that actually draw.
Yeah.
Oh fuck, man. We're so screwed. I don't know.
Why are we laughing about it?
I know, right? It's like this thing that we love so much. It's just done. No, I mean,
it isn't.
We got plenty to love. I actually imagine Mandalorian is going to be great. The new Clone Wars is going to be, the continuation is going to be great.
Yeah, honestly, I keep forgetting that that's happening, and I'm like, like we're talking about Dave Filoni's missing action. Maybe he's just pouring all his time into that. In which case, bravo.
Yeah. No, I agree completely. In fact, actually, the Star Wars show that we were mentioning earlier, they had Matt Lanter on in the most recent episode, who, of course, does the voice work for Anakin Skywalker, and to some people's mind is the real Anakin Skywalker, which, I'm not going to argue too much.
Right. I mean, I've said this before, and this isn't really a knock at the prequels, but if they decided to do an animated version of the prequels movies with Matt Lanter as the voice of Anakin Skywalker, I would have no arguments about that.
Yeah. I mean, I actually, in that interview, that was actually a good interview, but of course it was to promo a fucking add-on for Battlefront 2.
Right. I was just going to bring that up too. The fact that the only reason he was there was to promote an expansion of that game.
Yeah, which was a shame. But I mean, he did raise a great point actually in the interview where he said, because they were talking about how in the game, when they injected Anakin, Clone Wars Anakin Skywalker into it, or prequel Anakin Skywalker, that they made him look a little more like Hayden Christensen. Right. And even though they were going like with the long hair, I guess, that Matt Lanter's version of Anakin would have in the Clone Wars TV show. But he said, he's like, he says, to so quickly have to go from being, this like rather innocent boy into this character that goes through so much in episode 3, that Hayden Christensen had such a challenge, as an actor to like move that, to evolve that quickly, that character. I thought that was a salient point to bring up. That if you want to complain about Hayden Christensen, he had a hard fucking job. Not when it wasn't the fucking script from George Lucas. I mean, that was hard enough, but like what he had to deliver in the time frame that he had was very, very difficult. And Matt Lanter pretty much said, he's like, I'm glad I had 5-6 seasons to flesh it out.
Yeah. And he wasn't even a seasoned actor at that point either.
Right.
So, I mean, you're not getting an Alec Guinness or an Ewan McGregor, who were in their prime.
Right.
When they came into Star Wars.
Yeah. Or a Liam Neeson, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, anyway, so check out that fan production of the month, the Star Wars radio drama. I thought it was, I enjoyed the hell out of it, even though I recognize it's not like the grandest thing on planet Earth. But anyway, something that might have been the grandest, talk about not exactly fan productions, but certainly productions that, I had to kind of get George Lucas's stamp of approval, but were really being done by a lot of very passionate people. That would be the Star Wars content that came out, particularly in the early 90s, that was bringing us out of the dark times, which was the dark times was when there was no Star Wars content whatsoever. And we sure as fuck didn't get the epic continues. And the dark times would more or less officially end with the introduction of Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, which would really usher in the expanded universe, even though there's elements of it beforehand with Marvel comic books, Brian Daley's books, L. Neil Smith's books, and so on. It was really, really Heir to the Empire, the Thrawn trilogy, that brought the expanded universe and made it its own thing and really its own Star Wars greatness in its own right, well outside of the movies. Also, West End Games would certainly play a major, major role in that, in keeping people appeased and excited throughout the dark times when there was no like movies or anything for Star Wars. So we have been doing, for the past few months, we kind of been doing it. We do a question of the month at the end of each episode. And we had been doing best characters of the prequel trilogy, best characters of the original trilogy, best characters of the sequel trilogy, which was a severe challenge to come up with a great character for the sequel trilogy. But you can listen to those episodes to find out what the hell that was all about. So I wanted to do one, though, and we kind of hinted at it last month. Best character of the expanded universe. Now, not the new canon, but the expanded universe that started with Heir to the Empire, Dark Empire. and that would go on up until pretty much like, I guess, Outcast and, like post New Jedi Order, just before Disney, ended up buying it out and resetting the canon. And it's such a rich body of work and such a broad body of work. I don't think we could just pick one. It's easy in 3 movies to pick your favorite character. I think out of all the books, comics, video games, everything that comprises the expanded universe, it's very easy to just pick one. So I said, you know what, Rob, let's do 3. We can do a top 3 and break that down. And I think if you want to do it in like an order, 3 being the least, and then number 1 being our not least as in like the worst, but least as in least favorite, and go down, I guess, to number 1 were most favorite, but still favorites. We could switch off. So sure. Do you want to do that?
Absolutely.
All right. Awesome. So I guess I could start this off, and I'll start off with my number 3, which is, I don't think anyone would ever guess this, and I really don't, but I'm going to shoot for it. Is actually a character called Winter, who is an Alderaanian woman. So she survived the destruction of Alderaan. I'll just call it smoking hot, especially if you read the Essential Guide to Characters. She's like wearing this robe all the time and everything. She's brilliant. She's like a super spy, an assistant to Princess Leia. And maybe the coolest thing about her, and what I really loved about her, is that she ends up basically marrying, more or less, or maybe at some point in the EU they actually did get married, but she ends up at the very least dating Admiral Akbar. And I thought this was so cool that Akbar was like just such a smooth Mon Calamari, that, I mean, you can almost hear the song like Smooth Operator, but it's, it's Smooth Calamari. And he's getting this white hot, Star Wars character as a girlfriend or potentially even wife. And I thought that was fantastic. I thought that was so cool. And she just treats it like it's totally normal, and it's all written totally normal. And I just loved it. But I mean, she was also a very cool, like super spy, very brilliant character and everything. I really liked it. So Winter is my actual number 3. And I think she was first introduced actually in the Thrawn trilogy. So she kind of stands out in that. Anyway, Rob, if you have comments on that, or if you want to just go to your number 3, go for it.
There's kind of an interesting sort of lineage too, when like Winter is kind of like the Uber handmaiden.
Yeah.
Between,
yep.
and Padme and Leia, so
yes,
it's interesting that that exists. And the thing is the character of Winter predates the prequels.
Right. So who's copying who?
Yeah.
That could explain it, because I always thought the Handmaidens was such a cool little idea. Maybe that's why I liked it, because I love the character of Winter so much.
Yeah.
Because she was in a lot of content before the Phantom Menace dropped, right. Which, by the way, we are celebrating the 20th anniversary of. We're certainly going to do a deep dive on that movie in the coming months, probably in May. So anyway, but yeah, that's a great point to bring up. I didn't even think about that, but definitely a character ahead of her time. And I wish at some point Disney would bring her in. But anyway, what do you got, Rob?
That's going to be a theme with this,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Where is this character?
Right. So, my number 3, and by, what, it is hard to order these in a way, because really they're all great characters.
Yeah.
But, and certainly this character is no exception. And she comes from, we were talking earlier about the Dark Horse comics, mm-hmm. and this was a character created just for Dark Horse. It was uniquely Dark Horse's creation in a series that they called Tales of the Jedi, which actually, if you're familiar of Knights of the Old Republic, Tales of the Jedi actually predates in the timeline Old Republic.
Right. Yeah.
And so, like they have, just is like really like this is one of the cases, like if you look at Knights of the Old Republic, like the technology in that game still kind of looks pretty Star Wars. But you look at Tales of the Jedi and you can actually see like what looks like, like these look like old technology. There's actually a huge differentiation in the way things look in the Star Wars universe in Tales of the Jedi, as to where they pretty much look the same throughout every other era of Star Wars.
Yeah, there's even like 2 different eras of Tales of the Jedi, and one of them where even the Jedi have their lightsabers are connected to a backpack.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And later on, they would kind of retcon that a little bit with the last comic they did, the Dawn of the Jedi, which even predates Tales of the Jedi.
Yeah, that's way before everything. Yeah,
right. But anyway, the character I'm talking about actually appeared in the first Tales of the Jedi comic, which wasn't even its own comic at that point. I think she first appeared in a Star Wars segment in Dark Horse Presents.
Right.
And her name was Nomi Sunrider. And you get the story of how her husband was, seeking to become a Jedi in training. And unfortunately, he, intervenes in a conflict, tries to be a Jedi before he's really capable of, actually performing like a Jedi, and gets killed.
Yeah.
And basically she has force powers as well. And she was just kind of tagging along with him, but she ends up going to this, basically this Jedi Academy herself to get trained as a Jedi.
Right.
And she also has a daughter with her that she's caring for at the same time. And so later on, it ended up becoming so popular that they made a whole comic series. And they turned her story, they collected all of her issues, from Dark Horse Presents into a single issue and turned it into a full-fledged comic. And she would end up becoming, I would say, the most pivotal character in that series. A lot of people would say Ula Kildroma was, but really she was the one kind of holding everything together. And there were really dark times in these comics.
Yeah, and one could argue, much like Anakin supposedly did his turns and other things for Padme, that Ulick was doing a lot of things for Nomi,
right.
And so she was a very pivotal character. Yeah, that's a solid pick. I'm a huge fan of those comic books. In fact, before the new canon, they probably would have been my favorite. I mean, I really love them. And in fact, like you mentioned earlier, Rob, about how what comes first. The double-bladed lightsaber that Maul is known so well for was originally done by Dark Horse and Dark Horse alone for the Tales of the Jedi series, held by Exar Kun, who is kind of the big bad, the big heavy in that comic series, or would become the main villain. So yeah, that's an interesting thing, and even Nomi Sunrider's story, I'm feeling some parallels here. This is interesting.
And she starts off with this character that was very kind of unassuming and assumed to be weak. And she ends up really becoming one of the most powerful Jedi ever in existence. I mean, she was the one who basically developed Force meditation.
Right. Yeah, it's a great pick. I wouldn't argue with it for a second. I thought she was such a cool character, especially, certainly she stood out as well because at the time, when she was first introduced, we had very few female characters.
Right.
We basically had Leia and Mara Jade, like that, as far as anyone with even a name, so that's an awesome pick in my opinion. Want to go to number 2?
Let's do it.
Okay. I'll go to my number 2. Actually, I'll let it out. It's another female character, but it could have been a male. I could have picked either one. Cause I really like the relationship that they both had, but this character, she would end up really standing out in her own. And that is a character named Guri, who was a HRD, a human replica droid. And she was first introduced in Shadows of the Empire. She was kind of the hired assassin, hired gun, secretary, whatever, for Prince Shizor in that book. Who Prince Shizor could have been my number 2 pick. I actually really like that character. Guri, though, would kind of stand out on her own because they would do a sequel comic book series to the novel of Shadows of the Empire, which was called Shadows of the Empire Evolution. And in that, she would basically break free from her programming. She wanted to be her own person and everything. But this concept of the HRD, where it's a droid that looks as human as possible and acts as human as possible, was really cool. And honestly, it was the first time that I could recall that Star Wars ever openly talked about fucking, because Guri made it very clear that she would get into the hot tub with Prince Shizor and they would do the business, and they would get it on and everything. And she was just a very badass character. And certainly Shadows of the Empire Evolution would kind of take her to the next level. But it was one of the there's a theme right now, strangely, in Disney's version of Star Wars, where droids are trying to fight for their own liberation and everything. Well, Guri was doing this 20 years ago, and she was living up that storyline of droids need to be free and have autonomy well before it seemed to be some kind of odd, almost conspiratorial subplot being done by Lucasfilm today. So I think she's a brilliant character, very sexy character, which at the time was very rare for Star Wars. And she was one of the first things that really brought it up to where it said, no, this is for adults, and I really like that. Not that Star Wars always has to be, but I like it when it can at least go there. So anyway, Guri's my pick. Go for it, Rob.
Good pick. And, we were talking about West End Games earlier.
Yeah.
They also did a source book that was kind of tied into Shadows of the Empire.
Yep.
Where she's a big part of that is called Secrets of the Sissar Run. And she's even on the cover.
Oh, nice. Well, why not?
It's just, yeah. And it just like, and just to prove, like, if you think this is a minor character, no, she was important enough to put on the covers of books.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, she did effectively get her own miniseries. I mean,
right.
Down the line, that was very well done. So, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I love Shadows of the Empire. I've never made any bones about that, and Guri really stands out within that story. So, what do you got for number 2, Rob?
Number 2 is wow, we're kind of having a theme here. It's another female character.
Nice.
And this might be, a predictable pick, but that doesn't diminish how cool the character is. And it's, of course, Mara Jade. Yeah. And really, I mean, probably one of the best things to come out of the Timothy Zahn novels.
Yes.
Of characters that he invented. Of course, Thrawn is great and all of that, but Mara Jade, who would go on to become the wife of Luke Skywalker, which sadly doesn't have and will sadly never have a parallel in the Disney universe.
Right.
Apparently, was a force of her own. And initially, her and Luke did not have, like a very good relationship with one
she
another.
wanted to kill him.
Yeah. Until she found out that it was, the Emperor, kind of like, programmed her to kill Luke Skywalker.
Right.
She ends up fulfilling in a certain way, and then she's able to, to break those chains and kind of really become her own person, which was really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and also she was the lead character of Mysteries of the Sith, which was a great expansion pack to Jedi Knight, right? I mean, that was awesome. One of the thing that stands out for me with Mara Jade, just how impactful of a character she was. I remember when Star Wars Insider, the magazine, they hired an actress to pretty much, or a model anyway, to bring her to life. And she had the purple lightsaber long before, Mace Windu would.
Right.
And it was really cool. I mean, like people, when people often talk about EU characters, she's generally, I think, the first one that comes to mind as far as being like really great, because she did have such a rich backstory, and such a rich journey to becoming a hero, unlike, say, an Iden Versio.
Right.
So who I wish had a richer, longer journey to becoming a hero, but didn't.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's one of those cases where like, and Iden Versio had a lot of potential. She could have been that great, but here again, they dropped the ball. Yep,
completely. Yeah, I mean, tell me more about Mara Jade. Give me more if you want on the cell.
I mean, I actually I remember the photo that you're talking about, and I think they also used it in the trading card game too, as well, when they brought her character out for that. In fact, that's where I remember first seeing it, because I didn't have a subscription to the magazine at the time. And when I saw that for the first time, I was like, yes, that's her.
Yeah, exactly. Look great.
Right. And I continued, like, I didn't read all of the Star Wars expanded universe novels. I kind of dropped off at the point that the Yuuzhan Vong came into the story. And I know she had a big role to play in all that.
She dies.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, I was going to bring that up. This is that, what I've heard about and what I've read in different, Wikipedia articles and whatnot, is that she ends up getting killed by
Oh, I think she had an illness, if I remember correctly.
No, I thought she was killed by the solo child that went bad.
Oh, yeah. Well, right. So Jason Solo goes bad.
Yes, Jason Solo. Yeah, I think I didn't he kill her?
I didn't think. I thought she died from a disease. I thought she had
Okay.
like some kind of like fatal disease, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah,
It's been a long time.
right. Yeah. I read up to the point of the Hand of Thrawn duology,
Yep.
and I think that's the last time I read about her character. So I've been kind of like avoiding it just because I think I'm going to be disappointed if I actually read about the actual fate of Mara Jade. So
Yeah.
like in my mind here again, I'm sort of like, my headcanon, she's still out there somewhere.
Yeah, I think it's too easy a character for Disney at some point if they want to get a round of applause, at a celebration or something.
Yeah.
Just have her show up and the crowd's going to go nuts. So I hope that happens at some point, but we'll see. Even if she doesn't have the relationship with Luke, that's fine. She's a great character on her own.
It would be a great way to bring back in the whole idea of the hand of the Emperor too, because that was such a huge part of her character, and that was something so cool. And here again, that's another thing that ties into what we love about TIE Fighter, and
right.
I just all these cool things packed into one character, and how could you not like this character? I mean,
no. Yeah, it was true. She was truly great. I mean, and again, her even getting for them to bring in a model to do like a photo shoot for all that. I can't think of another EU character where they even did that. I mean, she was that big of a deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you did have some stuff from the games and stuff, and we'll talk about that. But yeah, you're specifically to bring in a model for just a photo shoot for a character that would only existed in the novels and the comics. I can't think of any other characters that got that treatment.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, anything else on that, or we'll go to our number ones?
Let's do the number one.
All right, I'll kick it off. I mean, this character is canon again in the new canon, but I somewhat agree that the EU version and the new canon version are a little different right now. So I can accept that, but anyway, Grand Admiral Thrawn himself. How do you top a villain like the Emperor that you were building up for 3 movies, 3 of the biggest movies in history? How do you come up with a villain that can be seen just as serious and just as deadly and just as fearsome, is that? And somehow Timothy Zahn fucking pulls that off in 3 books, and you get the ultimate badass that I think the galaxy has ever seen. And it was a wasted opportunity that he ends up getting offed, in the last book of the Thrawn trilogy. But there's a reason that those books are called the Thrawn trilogy, because man, he steals the show. He, as much as any of the original characters, in my opinion, from the original trilogy, Luke, Leia, whoever, he revitalized that entire franchise almost single-handedly. Mara Jade was a big part as well, no doubt. Like, she definitely brought in a lot of drama and a lot of hooks, but Thrawn was the stuff. I mean, he brought everything to another level. And this is another character that would cross. I mean, any time they could in the EU days, they try to inject that character into something. The TIE Fighter game, you get a clip with him in the beginning, I mean, just to do something, because everybody knew this character was so fucking badass. How can we include him in something? Please, let's do it. And it was that big of a deal. I mean, Thrawn was just, I still think he's the ultimate villain. He's more villainous than the Emperor, even though he acts with a sense of honor. But I mean, he's just more effective, I should say, as a villain than even as the Emperor. He is in very many ways the ultimate Star Wars character, in my opinion, and especially to have so little content or little talk about or little limelight as many of the main characters that we think of instantly, like Luke Skywalker and so on. No, this guy, I'm telling you, I think he saved Star Wars. I think he saved Star Wars Rebels for a lot of people. I mean, he is an absolute cultural force within that franchise. So anyway, that's my pick, and I don't think I need to say much more on him.
Yeah,
it's Sherlock Holmes in space. I mean, that's what he is.
You just took the words right out of my mouth, Brian.
Yeah.
It's a rare thing in literature where you can have a character that is convincing in their ability to use their intellect as a force to be reckoned with.
Right.
because there's been no like lack of Sherlock Holmes knockoffs, but to actually pull it off, that's a
Yeah.
rare thing.
Yeah, I mean, and no force powers, like no
Right.
bullshit.
Right.
But he could put a stop to anybody. I mean, granted, he's using Yasulamari, but he could put a stop to like any. I mean, that's what's incredible is that because
Right.
especially in the EU, one of the problems that a lot of people complain about the EU is that everything that they showed the Jedi could do in those books and in those comics, you wondered like, how could these people possibly ever be defeated? How could they ever be stopped? You never had a problem believing that Thrawn could just end them all, and almost did. Go ahead.
I think, and I also think in the world of literature, there's only really one other character I can think of that kind of carries the same sort of weight and gravitas and is able to pull this off convincingly. And I know it's also a favorite of Brian's, and that's Batman.
Yeah. Who's another Sherlock Holmes character.
Yes. Yeah,
exactly. No, yeah, I agree with you. Batman's the same thing, where in a world of super powered beings and all this, you totally believe that Batman could take out every single one of them. And Thrawn is the same exact way. And when you get characters like that and you do it believably, you have something so precious. And even Batman's popularity is testament to that. That you could run with that forever, and that's the only character you could almost ever need. So yeah, there's my number one. But anyway, go ahead, Rob.
Awesome. Great pick.
Yeah.
Okay, so number one, I am going with just a personal favorite that I have loved ever since he appeared on my monitor, and that is Kyle Katarn.
Aha, yeah.
First appeared in Dark Forces.
Yep.
And later on, they actually here again, I think it's probably the only other character that they brought in an actual actor to represent him, which was
right.
Forces 2 Jedi Knight.
Right.
And that was really kind of where like that game really just cemented my love of the character. A lot of people actually seem to prefer the third game in that series as being the best, but really to me, Jedi Knight, the first Jedi Knight game, and it's weird how they number it. It's like you have Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight, and then you have Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast.
Right. And then just Jedi Academy. Yeah.
Right. Which I mean, like, okay, wait. So is a Jedi Outcast actually Dark Forces 3?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, like the actor they brought, I thought he's just like I haven't seen him in anything else before or since, but I thought he just did a phenomenal job of portraying the character in the short little cutscenes that he did.
Yeah,
and the voice acting, I think he provided the voice acting to do. The voice acting for the game was phenomenal.
Right.
It was like really, even if that wasn't a Star Wars game, that would have been a standout story and game all in its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And he would end up crossing into other, parts of the EU. Also, you raised such a great point with this. I was saying Thrawn's like kind of the ultimate Star Wars character. Actually, the argument could almost go better for Kyle Katarn. And the reason being, I always felt, especially when I, first played Jedi Knight, and so on, he always felt like the perfect hybrid of Luke Skywalker and Han Solo.
Right.
Like he was both of them in one. He was this badass, wisecracking guy, but then he was a Jedi at the same time. Right. And was a Jedi teacher actually in Jedi Academy. Go ahead.
And he wasn't like this invincible character. He had, weaknesses and vulnerability and stuff like this. So,
right.
Yeah. I mean, like you think about if you put like, Luke Skywalker and Han Solo together, they would be like, this unstoppable character. But no, that's not the case with Kyle Katarn. And he's a real, authentic character.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, totally right from the first game. You instantly buy this guy's story. You instantly buy into what he has going on. And then, when Jedi Knight hits, and when they brought in the full motion video and everything, it just made it all the more real. And it was definitely the best time you had with the lightsaber at that point. And I think that also brought the character really to a whole other level of viability and reality in everybody's mind, which makes him a strong character as well. That's a phenomenal pick. And I would put Kyle Katarn absolutely right up there with Thrawn as far as like these almost cultural forces within the franchise. I don't think he gets enough credit. And another one where I think with any of these characters, why aren't they in the new canon? They deserve to be.
Well, a lot of people would argue that, Kanan Jarrus was Kyle Katarn, and I think that's fair. Yeah, yep. I think that's very fair to say, and it's also why I like Kanan Jarrus so much.
Sure.
I mean, not to say that he's a copycat or anything, but what those characters have in common make them great.
Yeah. The only thing is unless some weird thing happens, we'll never see Kanan Jarrus and Luke Skywalker like together. It's right. Where we did that with Kyle. Yeah. But
like the time we had with the character was great, and it's and there's just so many things to love about that show, and I almost want to put Kanan Jarrus on my. He's not an EU character, so he'd be new canon. Yeah, he'd be new canon, but he's Kanan Jarrus is on my list somewhere.
Well, I think we'll probably do new canon next month, and I think that would be you can inject him right there. So okay. We'll cover that then. But I hear you, and I never really thought about that, but I totally see it. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh yeah. Kind of is a Kyle Katarn.
Yeah, even down to the kind of like the outfit he had, where he had like that distinctive shoulder pad.
Yeah. Well said. Which he would wear better than Dash Rendar, even though
right.
Even though I do like Dash Rendar a little more than most people do.
Yeah, I like looks wise. I think Dash Rendar is really kind of like more of a copy of Cable from the X-Men series.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of it is too, like there was a very late in the run of the EU, there was a book series called Coruscant Nights, and Dash Rendar was in that, and he became a really hard-boiled, really cool character.
Yeah.
They're kind of detective stories in a way, and I really love the character, especially after that. But I mean, I know most people see him as a Han Solo clone, and not a good one, as to where Kyle Katarn would have those elements, but clearly not a clone. So anyway, yeah, great pick for number one, Kyle Katarn. I mean, ironically, like our top picks, or at least our number ones, are really from the same era, where the video games were getting introduced, and then the novels were getting introduced. Like, I mean, it was part of that initial tour de force, these initial characters that we got introduced to just coming out of the dark times of Star Wars fandom.
And like I said, that whole era of Star Wars back in the the 90s there, that really was kind of like the peak in a way. I mean, they're just like somebody couldn't recreate Star Wars or any of the original trilogy movies these days in this environment. I don't think you could have another Thrawn trilogy.
No,
is like this is, and I'm not knocking the new Thrawn trilogy that Timothy Zahn's worked on for the new canon, but it's nowhere near as good as the original.
No, I agree, and I love Timothy Zahn's new books. I mean, I really love them, but they're not the Thrawn trilogy. Like they're not even close. I can admit that. Yeah. And maybe, who knows where that falls in with these things, that he can't even do that again. And not just because of the new canon either, not just because the story changed. But I don't know. We're certainly going to get more Thrawn in Star Wars. We know that due to the end of Rebels. But anyway, hopefully we'll get Kyle Katarn. Hopefully we'll get Mara Jade. I would love to see any of that happen. And, just go down the list. Any of these characters are more than welcome to show back up. But it was nice to have a little look back at some of the classics, from like you said, really a amazing time that we're probably never going to get again in Star Wars. So anyway, unless you got anything else to add, Rob, we can wrap this baby up.
No, we're good to go.
Yeah. So we will be back for March of 2019. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of news to cover then. And actually, we will get into more of the comics then as well, because we are one of the rare shows, might even be the only one, that actually deep dives on the comic books in general that come out for Star Wars. So, we love to do that, and we'll get back to that next month. So anyway, Robin, as always, man, one of my favorite times of the month, baby. And this was no exception. So thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Right on. And, if you want to follow any of this, of course, just check out in the show notes. And we will see all of you on the other side next time on TIE Fighter Renegades, a Star Wars podcast. Woo!